Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing good. My name is Raagu. I'm with Group 2, and we are here to present on the topic turning strategic network resources into performance and the mediating role of network identity of SMEs. And the purpose of this study is to investigate how an SME's strategic collaboration and its attractiveness as a partner enhance firm's performance. Networks can become a source of strategic resources for SMEs which enhance firm performance, and such concrete strategic resource builds evidence-based network identity, which helps entice customers and other partners and build a network identity that sustains the performance of the firm beyond its early stage. As for the introduction, small and medium-sized enterprises are key actors in sustaining economic development. To overcome their well-known resource scarcity, such firms typically rely on networks. Networks provide access to resources such as capital, new business opportunities, flexibility, market knowledge, and access to new markets. Network resources refer to resources that a firm acquires through its network relationships. The network of an interconnected firm itself is a resource that provides access to other resources. There is a positive relationship between small firm networks and firm performance. The attractiveness of a firm is much more than a mere tool to secure survival related resources and has a strong implication on performance. Small firms can build their credibility through collaborating with prestigious partners, and network identity refers to a firm's self-perceived level of desirability as a partner. Basically, their own identity in their eyes and as seen by the outside world. Firms must also engage themselves in concrete collaborations and strategic resource exchanges to support their evidence-based network identity. So, evidence-based network identity performs a great role to convince customers and other business partners to help the firms realize the value of their resources and enhance their performance. So the figure below illustrates our theoretical model, which proposes that network identity mediates the relationship between strategic network resources and firm performance. More specifically, hypothesis 1 focuses on assessing how strategic resources gained from network relationships are related to firm performance. Then hypothesis 2 focuses on the mechanism that highlights the role of network identity to enhance the performance. Network resources can be a source of competitive advantage, and firms increasingly expand their networks for more specialized combination of resources that allow them to outperform their competitors and build competitive advantages. For example, a startup firm depends on network for operational capital, information, and advice, whereas an established SME can generate its own financing and may use its networks to secure exclusive partnerships with suppliers and create strategic alliances that are otherwise difficult to establish or strengthen. Such resources can lead to improved performance because firms with increasingly strategic resources will enjoy unique advantages over competitors that is difficult to imitate. Therefore, strategic network resources are positively associated with SME performance. Concrete collaboration builds SME's self-perceived attractiveness and hence helps the firm highlight its capabilities. It may also help attract new partners with high potential to contribute to performance. Therefore, network identity mediates the relationship between strategic network and firm performance. And now my groupmate will take over the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Raagu, for your introduction. Next, I will talk about the research method. The research of this paper is conducted on several internationalized small and medium-sized enterprises in Finland. The paper first examines the phenomenon of rapidly internationalized firms. Then the paper moves on to discuss about how highly developed network identity can help SMEs to overcome foreignness and outsidership. Lastly, the paper addresses established multinational SMEs, which the paper refers them as the survivor of early internationalization. These early survivors have proved the viability of their business. Early researches have suggested that an influential and prestigious alliance is vital for the success of the young firms, especially for them to overcome the newness. However, these advantages will reduce as firms grow to be larger companies. Recent studies have pointed out another side of the story. An attractive identity will also be beneficial to established firms and their long-term performance. The paper continues to state that recent research among network resources have been solely focused on early SMEs and neglected the importance and complexity of the network resources' influence on established SMEs. Thus, the context of the paper will be examining the interplay between external strategic resources, the attractiveness of the firm as a partner, and the performance of established SMEs. Next, I will talk about data collection and sample. The data was gathered through a survey conducted from December 2010 to March 2011. The survey was originally developed in English and then translated into Finnish by two independent professionals. In order to maintain the consistency and clarity of the survey questions, the translated version has been corrected and evaluated by top managers from 10 SMEs. When the survey was published live, respondents can choose two languages, both English and Finnish, to submit their response. In choosing the population, the researcher has first compiled a list of Finnish-based international firms from a commercial database. Then they excluded foreign-owned companies, subsidiaries of foreign-owned companies, and firms with no international activity. The population of this survey has to meet three criteria. The first, they must be an SME that has fewer than 250 employees and a turnover below 50 million. Second, they had internationalized in 3 years and at least 25% of their total sales come from foreign countries. Third, they had to be a new firm, thus not including subsidiaries or joint ventures. Companies have registered prior to 1985 was also excluded. The rest 1,559 businesses are in 7 categories, ranging from manufacturing to financial and insurance industries. Next, the 1,559 companies were distributed among 6 master's degree students. Each student made a phone call to the top manager of those companies to recruit their participation. There were 914 companies who have agreed to participate in this survey. The survey was sent via link to these participants, and there were a total of 511 usable responses, of which 199 meet the research criteria. Measures. The survey questions were divided into 4 main parts, with the first part evaluating the strategic network resources, the second part evaluating the network identity, and third part evaluating the performance of SMEs. The last part was used as a way to control variables, which I will talk about them later. Based on recommendations by earlier researchers, measurement scales were designed to assess the strategic network resources. The first scale measures how resources the firm gains from its business relationships have increased customers, volumes, and reputation. Respondents can choose a scale from 1 to 10, which represents strongly disagree or strongly agree. The second scale measures the sustainability of strategic resources. In this case, strategic advantages are considered sustainable when they are difficult to imitate or substitute. The paper explains these types of resources have a unique historical context that develops together with business relationships during a specific time. These resources would be difficult for outsiders to understand, thus preventing them from adopting or imitating. This scale is also measured from number 1 to 7, which represent the degree to which extent you believe the resources your firm gains from its business relationships would be difficult for other firms to acquire. For the network identity measurement, the respondents were asked to evaluate the attractiveness of their firm on a scale from 1 to 7, representing to what extent you agree or disagree with your firm as the most attractive suppliers to potential and present customers. Your firm becomes more attractive than other firms by working with your business partners, and your firm can attract the most competent business partners. To evaluate SME's performance, the researcher designed its measurement according to suggestions from previous research, that is to combine scale items with quantitative indicators which tap into varied elements of an entrepreneurial process such as opportunity recognition and legitimacy attainment. Based on this suggestion, the researcher used both subjective and objective performance indicators to evaluate SME's performance. For subjective performance, the respondents were asked to evaluate their performance relative to their competitors based on return on investment, customer satisfaction, outlook for firm's long-term survival. For objective performance, the researcher looked into financial data which indicate the change in the firm's return on capital employed from the time the survey data were collected to the subsequent year. The return on capital employed represents a firm's ability to generate value for its investors. As mentioned earlier, the last part of the survey were questions like the age of the firm, the number of employees in the firm. These questions were used as a controlling method because previous studies have suggested that the newness and smallness are two types of liabilities SMEs are likely to suffer. The firm's frequency of interaction with its business partners are also captured to ensure the degree of the strength of the business relationships. Next, Jake will provide the analysis and the results of this research.
Thank you, Haonan. In the research article, Turning Strategic Network Resources into Performance, the mediating role of network identity for SMEs, the authors of this research article performed 4 distinct separate tests to ensure that their data and their model were a good fit for one another. They started off by testing the validity and reliability of the measures that they were using in order to test this data. Then they tested for mitigation of potential for a common method bias to make sure that the variation in their data did not come from method bias. They then ran their hypothesis tests to actually test their 2 hypotheses, and following this, tested an alternate model to see if it was a better fit for their data. So for the validity and reliability of measures, the authors performed a series of confirmatory factor analyses. They used 4 indexes that are the most generally recognized and recommended in structural equation modeling. And they did this to test to see if their model is a good fit for their data. The 4 indexes that they used were the root mean squared error of approximation. They used the comparative fit index. They used the non-normed fit index and the standardized root mean residual. All 4 of those tests returned values that demonstrated a good model fit for the variables. And the model's good fit also supported, it was also supported by 2 validity tests involving average variance extracted values. So once they determined that their model was a good fit for their data, the authors tested for the mitigation of potential for any common method bias in the way that they performed these tests. They used something called Harman's single factor test, which tests if the variation in the data is the result of method rather than any actual variation. This test that they conducted, Harman's single factor test, it also concluded that common method bias did not pose a significant problem in the data for this analysis. And because of this, the authors were able to begin testing their 2 hypotheses. So first they tested hypothesis 1, which tests for a positive relationship between strategic network resources and firm performance in small to medium-sized enterprises. First hypothesis test determined whether or not there was a positive and significant relationship between these 2 variables. Upon conducting it, they discovered that there in fact is a positive relationship between strategic network resources and firm performance. Following this test, the authors set out to test hypothesis 2, which is the effect of strategic network resources on performance and how that is mediated by a network identity. A series of tests on a number of different variables surrounding both H1 and H2 went into this series of tests for the second hypothesis, and they were able to lend some support to hypothesis 2. But to be conclusive, the authors tested the full hypothesized model with a set of structural equations. The results were consistent with their predictions and demonstrated that strategic network resources are positively related to network identity, which then adds to firm performance both subjectively and objectively. Following these hypothesis tests, the authors finished their analyses by testing other hypothesized models from prior studies to determine if they describe hypothesis 1 or hypothesis 2 better than the author's models can describe them. And the tests for these alternate models determined that they did not, in fact, provide a satisfactory fit with the data. And because of this, the authors are confident in concluding that their model is a good fit for their data and shows statistical significance to support both of their hypotheses.
For the discussion, based on resource-based view, this study contributes 3 unique aspects to the literature of small business networks. First, this research provides information for existing research by demonstrate that growing strategic network resources are critical to the sustainable long-term performance of small and medium-sized enterprise. According to O'Donnell, Stan Davidson, Samurai, and his previous studies, they highlight the size, structure, and strength of the network's ties and their impact on performance in the early stage of the firm's development. Meanwhile, this study emphasizes the role of strategic resource exchange in enhancing corporate performance beyond survival. Furthermore, this research is one of the few research focused on whether the firm should consider expanding the resource-based view into their network domain to get resource as a strategic, and they provide that the network resource can indeed have strategic significance and is hard to be replaced. Second, this research discusses network signaling effects in the context of established small and medium-sized enterprise. For new firm, this network resource would help them to gain additional resource, and partners with good reputation will directly improve the small firm's performance. And this research extends the study especially upon the view of laggards, that reputational networks will decrease as firms develop in their own reputation. These reputational networks works for those firms who have a good track record in the early stage of firm's development. On the other hand, the author also argued the role of concrete collaboration, which exchanges strategic resources between key partners. This evidence-based network is necessary to obtain. It not only helps to access resource, but also make resource transferable. Finally, although the researcher acknowledged that depend too much on your network partner will lead to a weak position for small and medium-sized enterprise, but they also pointed out that those networks will help small and medium-sized enterprise gain more strategic resource, although there is some limitation that need to be considered, such as this study is based on an internationalized small and medium-sized enterprise in a small open economy that is distant from its major markets. In conclusion, this research is based on the following concepts. As the small and medium-sized enterprise grow, firms rely on their networks to carry out a dedicated combination of resources can help them outperform their competitors and build competitive advantage. Thank you.